Of course, settle in, my friend. Get comfortable. This isn't a story of kings and queens shouted from balconies, but a story of two very ordinary men, a secret, and the fragile, incredible weight of a promise. It's a true story, and it's best told as the light fades. The air in Paris on the evening of August 20th, 1944, wasn't just summer air. It was thick, thick with heat, thick with fear, thick with a desperate simmering hope. It smelled of dust, of diesel fumes from the few German trucks still rumbling through the streets, and underneath it all, the faint, sweet scent of blooming chestnut trees that seemed cruelly out of place. In a small, cluttered apartment overlooking the Rue des Archives, Jacques was trying to get his son Pierre to sleep. Pierre was 7, and his world had always been one of grey-green uniforms, of hushed conversations, of the absence of his favorite Uncle Jean, who had simply vanished one night 2 years ago. "Papa," Pierre whispered, his voice small in the dark room, the blackout curtains drawn tight against the night. "The man on the corner, the one with the loud voice. He said the Americans are coming. Is it true?" Jacques smoothed his son's hair. He was a printer by trade, a man whose life was built on the clarity of ink on paper. But now, nothing was clear. "We must be quiet, little fox," he murmured, using the old pet name. "We must wait and see. Now, sleep." But Jacques couldn't sleep. His mind was racing back to a different night, over 4 years ago, just after the city had fallen. The memory was as sharp as a shard of glass. He'd been in his print shop, shuttering it for what he thought would be the last time, when his friend, Henri, had burst in. Henri was a curator at the Musée National des Arts et Métiers, the great museum of inventions and technology. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a panic Jacques had never seen before. "Jacques," Henri had gasped, leaning against the door frame, trying to catch his breath. "They're here. They'll take everything. Everything." "Who will? Take what?" Jacques had asked, bewildered. "The Germans. The museum. Jacques, we have the originals. The original documents. The patents. Pascal's calculating machine. Lavoisier's laboratory notes. The Montgolfiers' drawings for the hot air balloon. Even Foucault's plans for his pendulum. They are not just paper. They are the soul of French thought. They are the first sparks." Henri had gripped Jacques' arm, his fingers trembling. "We cannot hide them in the museum vault. It will be the first place they look. They will loot them, send them to Berlin as trophies. They must disappear." Jacques had looked around his small shop, at the presses and the trays of type. "What can I do?" "You are a ghost, Jacques," Henri had said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "No one notices a printer. You can make things vanish into plain sight. I need you to hide them, not for a week, not for a month, for however long this nightmare lasts. You must swear to me. You must tell no one, not your wife, not your brother, no one. If they find them, they will destroy them, and us with them. Promise me, Jacques. Promise me on your son's life." And Jacques, his heart hammering against his ribs, had promised. The next night, under the cover of a blackout so complete it felt like the world had been erased, a nondescript van had delivered 12 unmarked wooden crates to Jacques' print shop. They were heavy. They smelled of old paper, oil, and history. He'd spent a terrified week working only by the faint light of a hooded lantern, dismantling his largest printing press. He'd hidden the crates in the cavity beneath it, bricking them in behind a false wall, then reassembling the monstrous machine over the top. It was backbreaking, terrifying work. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren felt like a death sentence. For 4 years, the press had sat there. For 4 years, Jacques had printed ration coupons, German propaganda leaflets he was forced to produce, and cheap newsletters, the weight of a nation's genius resting silently beneath his feet. He'd said nothing, not when his wife complained about the cold, not when Pierre asked why Papa was so sad. The secret was a stone in his gut. And now the Americans were coming. The city was erupting. The sound of gunfire, sporadic at first, was now a constant, crackling rhythm. The hope in the air was turning into something sharper, more dangerous. Liberation meant fighting. Fighting meant fire. Fire. The word jolted Jacques upright in his chair. His print shop was in an old building, mostly wood. If a shell hit it, if a stray Molotov cocktail landed on its roof, everything would be lost. Not just the building, but the centuries of ideas sleeping beneath the press. Pascal, Lavoisier, Foucault, they would be turned to ash. His promise would end in cinders. He had to move them. Now he kissed his sleeping son's forehead, grabbed a crowbar, and ran into the night. The streets were a chaotic ballet of shadows. Figures darted from doorway to doorway. The rattle of machine gun fire echoed down the narrow canyons of stone. A bottle smashed somewhere close. Jacques didn't care. He had a different battle to fight. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking, and finally burst into his shop. It was dark and familiar, smelling of ink and metal. He went straight to the massive press. He didn't have time for subtlety. He jammed the crowbar into the base and heaved. The sound of splintering wood was deafening in the silent shop. Brick by brick, he tore down the false wall he had so carefully constructed. The dust made him cough. His hands were soon raw and bleeding. Finally, he saw the first crate. He dragged it out. It was impossibly heavy. He needed help. He thought of Henri. Was he even alive? He hadn't seen him in months. He ran to the back room, to the forbidden telephone. He prayed the lines were still working. He dialed Henri's number. Each ring a lifetime. A click. A frail old voice. Hello? Henri, it's Jacques, the printer. A pause. Jacques, my God, why are you calling? It's not safe. The fighting, Henri. There will be a fire. I know it. The crates. I have to move them. I can't do it alone. Another pause, longer this time. Jacques could hear his friend's ragged breath. Where can you take them? Henri finally asked, his voice thin with fear. The metro. The Châtelet station entrance is just 50 meters away. The tunnels are deep. They'll be safe there. You are mad, Henri whispered. They will shoot you on sight. They are shooting everyone on sight, Jacques cried. I made a promise. The line went silent for so long, Jacques thought the connection had been lost. Then, a new resolve entered Henri's voice. Wait for me. I'm coming. 20 agonizing minutes later, a figure slipped through the shop door. It was Henri, but he was a ghost of the man Jacques remembered. He was thinner, older, but his eyes burned with the same fierce light. Without a word, they set to work. They dragged the crates out one by one. Jacques found a handcart in the alley. They stacked the crates precariously. The sound of the cart's wheels on the cobblestones was like a thunderclap. Every shadow was a German soldier. Every distant shout was aimed at them. They reached the top of the metro steps. The entrance was a black mouth swallowing the night. It was now or never. Together, Jacques grunted. They manhandled the cart, step by painful step, down into the darkness. The air grew cool and damp. The sounds of the battle above became muffled, distant booms. The tunnel was crowded with people seeking shelter. Families huddled together, their faces pale in the gloom of a few emergency lights. People stared as the two men, grunting and straining, wrestled the heavy cart down the platform. They must have looked like looters, thieves in the night. But no one stopped them. In the upside-down world of a city being liberated, nothing was strange anymore. They found a maintenance alcove, a deep, dark niche near the tracks. It was perfect. As they shoved the last crate into the darkness, a tremendous explosion shook the tunnel from above. Dust rained down from the ceiling. People screamed and ducked. Jacques and Henri slumped against the cold tile wall, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. They had done it. The first sparks of a nation's mind were safe. They sat there for a long time, listening to the war rage overhead. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The promise had been kept. Eventually, as the first grey light of dawn began to filter weakly down the steps, the gunfire began to change. It was less German MG-42 and more American M1 Garand. There were new sounds, cheers, singing, the joyous, unafraid shouting of a city rediscovering its voice. Jacques and Henri emerged, blinking into a new world. The sky was blue, and rolling down the Rue de Rivoli were not German tanks, but strange, wonderful American jeeps, filled with grinning, waving soldiers, and surrounded by a sea of Parisians laughing, crying, and handing them flowers and bottles of wine. The war wasn't over, but Paris was free. Jacques walked home, his body aching, his clothes covered in brick dust and grease. He pushed open the door to his apartment. His wife was at the window, tears streaming down her face. Pierre was jumping up and down. "Papa, Papa, they're here. The Americans are here." Jacques swept his son into his arms and held him tight. He looked at his wife over Pierre's shoulder and gave her a small, tired smile. He still couldn't tell them. The secret was his to keep a little while longer. But as he held his son, listening to the church bells of Paris ring out for the first time in 4 years, he felt the stone in his gut finally dissolve. He had kept his promise. He had saved the light. And now, as the city celebrated its freedom, he knew that deep in the belly of the metro, the quiet, patient ideas of Pascal, Lavoisier, and all the others were waiting. Waiting for the world to be sane again. Waiting to inspire the next generation, to spark the next great dream. And that, my friend, is a true story. It's a story about the immense power of a single, ordinary promise. It's about how history isn't just made by soldiers and politicians, but by printers and curators, by fathers and friends who do a quiet, brave thing in the dark because they said they would. Sleep well.